You were not born talented, you were built. Grand Regent Thragg of the Viltrum Empire did not get lucky with his genes or stumble into greatness through one impressive fight. He is the calculated result of a species that treats strength as the only thing worth measuring, refined by a civil war that killed off everyone who could not keep up. Now let us actually think about what that means. Start with the baseline, because you cannot understand Thragg without understanding what a Viltrumite already is before any of the extra layers get added on. Viltrumites come from a homeworld with gravity roughly 5 times what you experience on Earth. Every single day of their evolution happened under a crushing weight that would flatten the human body in minutes. Their muscles and their skeletons did not evolve separately from each other. They fused into one integrated system, so strength, durability, and speed are not 3 different powers stacked on top of each other. They are 3 expressions of the same underlying design. That is why a Viltrumite punch doesn't just hit hard, it hits with a kind of density behind it that makes the impact feel less like getting struck and more like getting hit by something that should not be able to move that fast. Their bodies also do something stranger than raw toughness. Viltrumite biology is often described in terms of stronger atomic bonds, and while that sounds abstract, the effect is simple to picture. Their tissue resists being torn apart at a fundamental level, the same way a denser material resists cutting compared to something soft. That is why conventional weapons barely register against them. That is also why some of the very few things that can actually hurt a Viltrumite work by going around that durability entirely instead of through it, like an attack that bypasses physical toughness and delivers damage directly, or an internal explosion that doesn't need to break through skin because it detonates from the inside. Then there's time. Viltrumites age at a fraction of the rate you do, and that slow aging isn't just about looking young for centuries. It means their bodies keep refining themselves through decades of survival and combat exposure, long after a human would have already died of old age. An older Viltrumite is not just experienced, their physiology has had more time to be tested by warfare in extreme environments, so they come out the other side more dangerous than they started. Age for this species functions like compound interest, it just keeps adding. That's the baseline. That's what every full-blooded Viltrumite enters for free simply by being born into the species, and it already sounds like enough to make anyone unstoppable. So now you have to ask what happens when one specific individual gets that same starting foundation and then has something else layered on top of it deliberately. That's where Thragg comes in, and this is where biology stops being the whole story. Thragg's parents were not average Viltrumites. They were 2 of the closest advisors to Emperor Argal, which meant they were already counted among the strongest members of the entire race before Thragg was even conceived. He was not raised hoping to become powerful. He was raised as a project with a single explicit goal: to become the strongest Viltrumite who would ever exist. Every part of his childhood was combat training. Every part of his development was calculated toward that outcome. This is not a story about someone discovering hidden potential. It's a story about someone's potential being decided before he could talk. Then the Civil War happened. Argal was killed, the Empire fractured, and Thragg fought through a war that existed specifically to determine who among the Viltrumites deserved to keep leading. What came after that war was the Great Purge, a deliberate culling of the weakest members of Viltrumite society, carried out to make sure only the hardest survivors remained standing. Think about what that actually does to a population over time. It's not just violence for its own sake, it's a filtering process, removing every soft edge and leaving behind only the individuals who could survive the harshest possible selection pressure. Thragg didn't just survive that filtering process, he came out on top of it, which by definition means he outperformed every other Viltrumite who was being tested by the exact same brutal standard. So now put both of these together, the biological baseline every Viltrumite gets for free, and the specific engineered, war-tested refinement that only Thragg went through.
A regular Viltrumite already has bones and muscle fused into one weapon system, blood that resists being torn apart, and a span that lets strength accumulate for centuries. Thragg has all of that, plus a childhood built entirely on maximizing it, plus a war that erased everyone who might have competed with him for the title, plus centuries more of combat since then to keep refining what was already a close finished product at birth. That is not one advantage stacked on another. That's the ceiling of an already overwhelming species hit twice. You can see exactly what that looks like when it collides with something real. When Thragg emerges from the wreckage of a planet that had just been destroyed by 3 separate combatants working together, he's not injured, he's not slowed down, he's angrier, and he immediately proves that a planet's own molten core was not enough to leave a mark on him. He kills Thaddeus, one of the most dangerous Viltrumites in the Empire's history, in seconds. He sends Nolan Gryson, a being who once wiped out an entire alien civilization by himself, flying through a planet's atmosphere with a single punch, and does it again once Nolan gets back up. Mark Gryson assumes that beating another powerful Viltrumite means he's earned the right to test himself against Thragg. He finds out within moments that the math doesn't work that way. Thragg doesn't fight him like an equal testing an equal. He fights him like someone finishing a task he's already solved. The only real challenges Thragg has faced have not come from strength alone. They've come from very specific exceptions, beings who match him only under narrow conditions, or environments extreme enough to strain even his healing, like the surface of a star. Nothing beats him outright. A few things briefly interrupt him. That gap between those two outcomes is the entire point. So, you were not born talented. Nobody in this story was. Thragg was born into a species already built to dominate everything around it, and then a war took that species and cut it down to its single hardest surviving edge. Strength didn't make Thragg who he is. Being the last one standing, after everyone weaker had already been removed, did.